previous sessions too?
I didn't. I just thought of it just now. So,
Because I was looking for them and I didn't know where to find them.
well, what I did is in the previous sessions I had videos already that I had already created, and they're I think I shared a link. If not, just let me know. I'll send it to you. But at least this session will be shared. I'm not 100% how it works. You're recording, yeah. Okay. So just want to make sure everyone's fine with recording it. So that way, whatever I present on the screen, it will be available. So I'm sure I'll be able to send you guys a link. We'll do it after this class. All right. So everyone's able to see my screen and stuff. All right. So hopefully at this point, like once you get to this point, you've created your environment. So last week's assignment was to create the AP schema. So the schema is another word of calling it a database. You'll hear both terms. It depends on the environment. A lot of people call it schema, but it also depends on the systems that you work with. So for example, if you work with what Alicia worked with, SQL Server, a lot of times people just call it database. If you work with Oracle, you'll hear more people call it schema. So it just depends on what system that you're using. I usually just call it database. AP is our database, so you've set that up. But after this week, you guys will build two other databases. One is called EX, and then there's another one called OM. That's the schema names, or database names, but they have data that goes with that, and that will help out with the coursework. So the exercise that we go through today will be all related to the stuff that you'll do there. So I kind of broke it down from basic stuff. So there's a couple different ways that you could do stuff. So when you want to use a different database, at the beginning of it, you could write the query where you do select all from the database name dot, or you could use it like this. So there's two ways you could do it. You could do it. So for example, we're going to be using this database right here, AP. So I could come up here and just type in use AP and semicolon. And what that does is it tells the environment that I want to query against that database or that schema. And so yeah, this does help. And so then if I just want to query a table, I can say select everything from the invoices table. And how do I know there's an invoices table? Well, there's a couple things. So if you go underneath the schema or the database, it'll list out the tables. I don't know if I can make this a little bit wider or whatever. Anyways, it'll list out all the tables. So everything down here are all the tables that are listed. So that tells me that there's an invoice table. Now, you could drill into the invoices table and you could look at it'll give you the columns. We'll talk about all these other things at another time, but it'll give you the columns and it'll tell you for example, it'll tell you what the key values are and so forth. But right now, all we're worried about is there's ways to get the data quickly. You could come up here and write the query. You could even just do this. You could right click on it. You see where it has select 1,000. So if you see up here, these are default. You could put don't limit it. And what that means is you could pull anything that you want. The reason you want to give it a limit, I'll give you an example. So like Alyssa was talking about the place that her and I worked at, there was a table called ABID-wise detail table. That table had 27 columns across and it had like 25 million rows. So let's say in this case, I didn't limit it and we had 27 million rows. What do you think would happen? My computer would run out of memory and I would have to do a cold boot on my computer because it wouldn't stop. And then the other problem is, even though you did that and you exit it, if someone else is in the class trying to query that table, it's going to be slow because that process is still running on the environment, and that's usually when the database administrator needs to go kill something called a SPID, S-P-I-D, and it's like a specific unique ID that's tied to that process, and it has to be removed, else it will keep going. So I'll keep it to 1,000. So one thing I could do is I could just right-click on invoices and do select 1,000. And as you see here, this is hard for me, it gives me all my data here. Now you see how they did it is they just did ap.invoices versus using it. So where I could have just did this right here and said use AP and I could say select all from invoices. Now, what I could do here to comment this line out, because you see the X on here, it doesn't know what to do with it. You could do Shift and 3, and I usually do it a couple times. What that is it's commenting out. So comment out means, if you've ever heard the word pseudocode, you use pseudocode and say, hey, this is what this process is doing. And comment out just means that it's not going to be executed when you run the query itself. So if I run this query, you have two ways that you can run it. You could, I don't know what happened, it just crapped out on me. All right, that's new, first one. All right, so we are going to pull it back up. For some reason, it just blew up. All right, that's different. You guys can still see my screen, right? Yep. All right, take that as a, use AP, select all from invoices. All right, I know I can confess them to my password. All right, so as you see here, it was able, I'm not sure why it keeps having that exclamation there. I don't know. Anyways, it did pull the data up. You can, over to the right in MySQL, you could choose different ways. You can use form editor. I don't recommend any of these. I would just do results grid. It gives you everything you want. And I'll show you guys later how to export it to like Excel or something like that if you want to play around with it. But anyways, this right here is pretty easy. It just gives you your column names or data. We only did 1,000, but there could be, let's say we wanted to identify how many rows there are. So I'm going to put hashtags on here to tell you what it's doing. So identify the count. So in order to do that, we have to use a function. So if I do select count, and then I do this right here, the star in the mean means all, and then in parentheses, what happens is count is the function, and you have to use parentheses and pass a parameter in. So in this case, the value that we're passing in is the star, the asterisk, and it tells the system that you want to pull all values up, okay? So then I could do from the table, invoices, and then I'm going to show you another trick. So here's the thing, I have two queries here, and the last thing I don't want to do is I don't want to run both of them. I just want to run one. So what I could do is I could highlight this query right here and hit the execute button. And what it'll do is it'll only run that query itself. And as you see here, the count is 114. So that tells me there's 114 rows available. Even though I have my limit set to 1,000, I just wanted to pull a count. So if I came into this class and said, hey guys, I need a total count of customers or students that attended last week's class just on the 7th floor between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., whatever the case is, you can pull that out and do a count and get, hey, there was 800 students here. Any questions from anybody in the class or on the computer remotely? All right.
I have one.
Please.
Whenever I put the two hashtags, it doesn't comment out my code.
Okay.
At least it doesn't look like it, like yours.
All right, so let me, I'm going to make a note of this. Who's that speaking?
Maxwell.
Perfect. All right, so if we have time at the end, I'll have you share your screen and we'll go through it. So you said hashtags not working.
Okay.
No, that's good.
Yeah, mine wasn't working.
All right, so someone else wasn't working either. Does yours look like mine? Does it look like mine?
It's blue, not gray.
Okay, yeah, so it's probably just different color. Use a Mac or PC?
PC.
Mine's blue too, but it still works.
It still works, okay.
Blue.
All right, we'll check it out at the end there. So any questions already on board? Time allows at the end, we'll go do it. If time doesn't allow, then I want you guys to send me a screenshot and we'll figure it out. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about ascending and descending order. So a couple things that we're going to talk about today, just going through my notes. We're going to talk about ascending and descending. So we'll talk about sorting. We'll talk about calculated values. We'll show you how you can use math calculations in SQL. We'll talk about concatenation, how to consolidate two values. We'll show how to add spaces when you're doing that. We'll talk about date formats, different date formats that you can use. We'll talk about rounding the number to your nearest tenth. So going back to basic math, we'll talk about how you can use it in SQL. Then we'll talk about different expressions such as equals, less than, greater than, not equal, and so forth. We'll get into join tables, how to join different tables. So you have your inner joins. We'll talk about the different joins, left joins, etc. This chapter talks about doing subqueries, but I'm sorry, it's just way too much, and I'm not going to present that. And then union, we'll talk about union queries, what that is. I think personally, this information is a lot of information, but it's a lot of good basic information to get started with the assignments. All right, so this one right here is identify accounts. We need to go back to. The next one is we're going to talk about sorting. So ways to sort different values. So one of the things is you don't have to do the star on everything to get everything. You might only want some of the data. So let's say you want specific fields versus everything. So you could type out that. So let's say in this case right here, I want to pull out only certain information. So I'm going to say, give me the invoice ID, give me the invoice total. And you're also a question that you may be asking, how do you know what these fields are? Well, you can click on the table, invoices right here, and I could click on columns, and it lists all the names out to me. Now, sometimes when you type it in, based off the IntelliSense, it'll pick up what the field is. So, for example, let's see if it'll pick it up. Sometimes it does. Now, it didn't, but okay, now it's doing. So, invoice. So you see here, it's picking up some of the tables that are cached into the system. So it just depends. And eventually, if I do, let me do this real quick, and I just do ap.invoices. I'm going to see if it now, by putting the from table, if it starts picking up more. Yeah, so you see how, since I put the from table in, now it knows, hey, here's a list of all the fields, the columns that are in the database. So it allows me to pull up specific information. So in this case, I'll do invoice date. It also allows you to not have to type a lot too. So I know I want invoice total. So I'm going to go invoice, and I know total is right here. I'm just going to go down here and click on it. So I just saved like 8 characters from writing, just right off the bat. So first of all, first thing you want to do is, before sometimes you write your whole query, you want to make sure it works. So what I'll do here is I'll execute this. I could also click F5 on my keyboard, and apparently this one's not working. Usually you can hit F5 and it'll run the query for you. So as you see here, it pulls up my data. It has the invoice total. I'm going to zoom out for a second here. It has the invoice date and total, just as we wanted it to be. Now, if I wanted to get more particular, and I'm not worried about these X's, I'm not sure, it must be a PC thing. It's actually not an error message. I'm not sure why it's doing it. But if I wanted to sort on something, you can sort 2 different ways, ascending or descending. So I have to get rid of this semicolon, because if I don't, it'll execute the query there and not let me finish it. So I could do something called order by. I say order by, and what do you want to order the stuff by? Do you want to order it by invoice ID? Right now, invoice ID is by ascending order. Do we want to invoice it by date? So I'll say, give me everything by invoice date, but do it descending. So you see there, it gives me DESC or ASC. So I want everything in descending order because it's going to show what happened, the latest, greatest. So if I execute, as you see here, it starts off and goes from 2018, August, all the way down to, so it'll show you what happened last. And typically, when you work in an environment, you'll get these questions more often. People will say, hey, give me the latest that just happened. Like, what was the last customer who came in here? Who was that, and how much money did he spend? Kind of like what she mentioned about Willie Island. So that is descending and ascending. So in order to do that, you have to specify what field or fields you want to descend on. You can, in this case, we only have this one right here, but let's say that we have a bunch of columns across. You might want to specify another field to descend on next. So you'll choose which one you want to go in which order. So it just depends on. She also said a good question, like sometimes customers don't know exactly what they want. They know they want this, but they don't know how to tell you to get it. So like she mentioned, you might have to get a phone call together and understand what they're trying to pull, because they're expecting you to know the data the best. So they're not going to know what table is this or that. They just know that they want, X, Y, and Z, and you have to kind of figure out what that means. Any questions? All right, moving on. All right, so that's our sorting. So the next thing that we're going to do is talk about calculated values. All right, so what are calculated values? It's when you take values and add them together. So in this case right here, we're going to we're going to still pull from the invoice table. So in this case, I'll type in, zoom in a little bit, select, and these will be the fields I select from. I'll do invoice ID. I'm going to query my thing a little bit different. Invoice ID. Let me put the name of the table. Put invoices. There we go. And we will do invoice total. And invoice total we'll do, and you'll notice here I'm doing a comma. So you have to do a comma after every line except your last line, so it knows what to do. So we're going to do credit total. Now we're going to do plus. So we're going to take the credit total plus the payment total. I'm going to show you two different things to do with this. And so before we do everything else, we're just going to do this. One thing is, if you ever see this thing like this, it says it's a syntax error. It just thinks that you're running all the queries at once, and it's telling you it's not going to be able to run because this one never ended. We never execute it. So if I put a semicolon there, that goes away. But I don't care because I'm going to highlight the values and run it individually anyways, because I don't want all the data there. So I ran that query, and it gave me a couple things I want to point out here. It gave me a new column name called credit total plus payment total. Do you guys think that if you're giving this to your customer, they want to see this? What do you guys think, yay or nay? Do you think they want to see that column called credit total plus payment total? No, right. So we want to give it some type of name. So I'll say I'll say calc values. I'll say calculated payments. Now, as you see, I called it as, and what that does is it'll name the table as. So now I've changed it to calc payments. So if you use the word as, it gives it some type of value at the end of it. So it says, okay, that's what my new name is going to be. So now we have the invoice total, and we have the credit total plus the payment total, which I don't know why they're the same, but either way, it's adding the values up together. In this case, I would probably say, that's weird. Why are they the same? So this is what I'm going to do is credit total and payment total, they must be the same. So I'm going to investigate and do this. And I'm also going to do this. And I'm going to run the query and see what values I get, because to me that's odd that they're the same value. And maybe they are, that's fine. Yeah, so now I do a QA, you see those values are all the same. Not sure why they are, but they are, so it's kind of funky. But that's fine. But this is a lot, so you want to, in this case, I'm going to hashtag those out real quick. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to run my data again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for specific information. So now I'm going to use a where clause. So a where clause would be like if you are, you go to Google and you type in, for ladies, you type in purses, boots. What do you get when you type in boots and purses? You get a bunch of stuff. You get That's called a wildcard search. If you're looking for a specific search, you want, say you know what type of boot it is. Like for example, you go to look for a new vehicle, and the first thing I ask you is what brand you want. Okay, I want a Toyota, I want a Tundra. What year do you want? You want this, this, and that. Ask you all this information. What it's doing is it's doing, the first thing is called a where clause, and the rest of the statements are called and statements. And that's what we're doing here. We're saying, hey, where invoice ID equals 17. Just like that. And we'll learn more about some of this other stuff later, like data types and stuff. But right now I'm just saying, give me everything equals 17. So it gives me a specific value, specific ID versus everything, because we're looking for certain stuff. So a customer comes to you and says, hey, give me all the invoices that were paid for by invoice 2678. All right. So you just run this query, gives you the value, you send it to them, so here you go, you're on your way. One of the coolest jobs I had starting off when I got into SQL, like I said, I lied and said I knew it. I only knew I knew software development. I knew like C++ and some Java and stuff like that, but I didn't know SQL. I just said I did. I think I kind of missed. I don't say I lied. I just think I miscommunicated what they wanted. So I kind of learned it on the job. And my job turned out to be where people would just send me requests and say, hey, we had a mailbox. They just send requests and say, we need a report on this. And it'd just be a query, and it'd just be in Excel, and I send it to them and say, here's your reports. And that was a fun job because kind of like Alicia, one day you're mad crazy, you're getting all these report requests, and what's happening is everybody's running reports at the same time. You're all using the same bandwidth, kind of like the internet's been here at the university at times, and you just want to ensure that you're doing a good job. So it could be a fun job and it could be monotonous at times. Any questions on the calculated values? All right. You guys are an easy class. All right, moving on. I'm going to save this code, by the way. I need to save as. Okay, moving on. Next one is show how to use math. All right, so we'll put math calculations. So in this case right here, all right, so now what we're going to do here is it's pretty much the same as that one. It's the plus. So let's say we'll do select invoice ID. We select invoice ID, and then we take, let's do this here. I want to say invoices, and then we're going to do invoice ID and divide it by, we'll just give it a number, we'll say 33. We'll say as decimal value. Now you got to be careful, because if I put decimal, then what that thinks is, it thinks that I'm doing something that we'll learn later on called casting and converting. It thinks that I'm doing that, and that's not what I'm doing. So I have to specify what I'm doing. So I'll say decimal value, and then I'll do comma, and then I'll do invoice ID. I'm just giving it random numbers. I'll say times 100. I'll say 10. And we'll call it as new value. This is just dumb data, doing dumb stuff, but to show you how it works, okay? And then, let's say we want to order by, and that's the way that we sort. We'll say order by invoice ID, but we know it's going to give us ascending, so we're just going to say give it to us ascending from backwards. And so now if I run this query, I get this crazy data here. Now, you notice here, what it does is it gives us a decimal value, which later on, we'll learn how to, you see it gives the 3.4545, it gives the values. So we'll learn later on how to, because let's say that you're going through your bank account. And it says that you have $3.45 and 45 cents and so forth. You don't want to see that. You just want to see, well, you don't want to see $3.45, obviously. But as an example, but college students, that's, you know, we're all poor when we're in college, I get it. But if you have 3.45 is what you want to see. So later on, we'll learn how to take that off and only give 345 versus 45 multiple times. But right now, we're just learning how to, so we're just learning how to do the basics. And that's all we want to know how to do. Is we need to understand how to ride a bicycle first before we go further on a bike. Any questions? Okay. There is a pop quiz at the end of this class on how to do some of this. You guys are okay with that, right? You guys are too easy. All right. Concatenation. Does anyone even have an idea what concatenation is? So
Adding?
adding, yes, you're right. Adding, that's exactly what it is. Thank you. Who was that?
Ben.
Man, you know, it's so difficult, Ben, because it's my problem is when we start off and everybody's in a classroom, it's like getting to know everyone's name and picture your face, and by the end of the semester I know everyone's name. But I think it's more difficult because now I have to use my sound and remember whose sound was what. So, and then everybody in the class looks the same because we all have masks on. We look like we're going to rob a bank. So it makes it difficult. But thank you, Ben. You're right. So if we wanted to consolidate or add two columns together, that's what we're going to learn how to do. And there's reasons you would want to do it and reasons that you won't want to do it. So I think this one's going to be vendor's table, and I think its vendor is a different table. Well, maybe not. It might still be here. Nope, it's on this one. All right. So we'll call this one cat. Adding, we'll just call it adding columns together. Very good. All right. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to add columns together. So we're going to say select. And I'm going to put from right away so that we know where we're selecting from. So we'll say vendors. And I don't know if we're going to have a, yeah, we'll just do that. All right. So we're going to select our vendor city. We're going to select, and before we even add it, I'm going to show you what it looks like, and then we can talk about what we're going to do with it. So we're going to do state. And yeah, we'll just leave it like this for now, so that we can see what it looks like. So if we just pull this data right here, perfect. You see that we have Madison, Wisconsin. I think I need to sort by because I want to at least see what the heck I'm looking at. So let's do order by state. And we'll do, I'm going to do two order bys. I'm going to do it state and then city. And I'm going to do it by sending order. So that way it gives me everything from state first and then city afterwards. Because if we do city first, then it'll give us everything. Or states will be mixed up. So now we start with Phoenix, Arizona. The problem with this here, does anyone see a problem with this? What are we seeing here? Yeah, so we're seeing it repeated. We're seeing duplication. So now there's two different ways that we could do this. We want to, because in this case right here, we just want to see one value versus seeing it 3 times. So and the thing is, it could be a couple things. The data could be duplicated in a database. It could be, this is actually a good topic of conversation. It could be duplicated in the system, or it could be that the row, kind of like I talked about first week. Remember I said when you're Persian rows, you have to make sure that you separate stuff. This could be another example where there's another field that has a different value than that. And it's not usually a unique ID. It could be something else. But nonetheless, in this case, we just want to see the single value. So there's a couple different ways that we could do it. So let me zoom out so I can see what I'm doing here. I could do this. I could type in this word distinct. And what distinct means, it gives me distinct values. So, which should give me a single value, which it does. So you see here, you can type in distinct, and distinct just means don't show the duplicates, just show the single values. Another way of doing it is doing something called a group by. So I could do this and say, and we haven't got the group by, so we could do something called a group by. And then when you group by, you select what columns you want to group by. So I could do city and state, because you have to do them both. So anytime you do a group by, you have to do any fields that you select, any columns. So in this case right here, I'm going to do this, and I get the same value. So your first question is, which one's right and which one's wrong? Well, if I told you that one's better than another, it's not really. If you're just doing something ad hoc, go with distinct. It's the right way of doing it. But let's say that this query is being like Alicia mentioned, they use something called SSRS, which is it's called SQL Server Reporting Services, and it's a .NET website. So she pushes a button, and her report goes to that web page, and then the user could go out and look at the web page, and there's the report. So the right answer is group by. You always want to use a group by. It's the right way of doing it because it's going to be right 10 out of 10 times. Sometimes distinct could cause problems down the road, but if you're trying to hide something up and you're trying to present it to the client, maybe just wing it real quick just to show them, hey, it works, but you know in the back of your mind that you have to purge that data. It happens a lot because kind of what she talked about in the company that her and I work for, a lot of times is companies would send us data, and what would happen is we had a process built that would automatically take that data and push it into these tables. But the company she did mention, EDMC, called Educational Management Company, they used to send me this file every single day, and no lie, every day it would be a million rows. And every day, because the data that was entered in was manually, so imagine I didn't want that job, but it was a manual intervention, and 9 out of 10 times, the data would always be duplicated. But we had a process that picked it up and said, hey, you know what? You have 47 duplicate matches. We would just throw it into a temporary table and keep that for our reports. And we would not put that in there. But if it wasn't captured like it wasn't in the beginning when we were building the process, there was a lot of times we reported bad data. We said that, you know what, you made $6 million, well, really you only made $2 million because it was multiplies. At the end of the day, it's customer's always right, you're wrong, you should pick it up. Because that's why you're paying X amount of dollars. Anyways, any questions on group buying? All right, so now let's talk about how to put these guys together. So we have them separate, but if we want to put them together, we could do this. We could do comma, we could do vendor city, and then you could do plus vendor state. Oops. Maybe. And that's it. What do you guys think? Easy? Or do you think this is wrong? Let's see what happens. It blows up. Gives me a 0 value. What do you think I'm doing wrong? What do you think's happening? What do you think the system's doing? I did this on purpose to see if anyone's paying attention. What do you think's happening here? I used the plus, so what's the system think I'm doing? The system thinks I'm taking what?
Numbers.
Numbers, thank you. It thinks I'm taking numbers and adding them together, and by default it gives it the value 0 because those fields are, and we'll learn about those data types, are text types. So there's no value. MySQL is nice, but if you use Oracle or SQL Server, it will blow up and give you some funky message saying you can't do this or do that. So what we need to do in this case is we need to use a function. So what we do here is we type in concat. You see right there, it picks it up. And then what we need to do is pass it a value. So in this case right here, we want to pass in vendor city. We do comma, and then we'll do vendor state. So how this works is a function, and we pass in values for it. Now, if I do this right here, execute it. Now, we're almost home, but we still have a problem. Anyone see what the problem is? So, what's that? Yeah, so it's like on top of each other. It needs a space. Anyone want to take a stab at how you would create a space? Let's say that I gave you the answer a step ago, almost. So we want to add it together again, but in this case, since we're doing commas, we could do a double, oops, we could do a quotation mark, 2 quotation marks, and a comma. So what we're adding here is we'll do a space here. So what we're doing ultimately is we're adding three parameters. The city, we're doing a space with double quotation marks, and then the state. So now we should have Phoenix, Arizona, Anaheim, etc. So now if we run this, you see it's perfect, almost. But now I'm getting a little picky, because normally when we write out an address, we'll do Phoenix, comma, Arizona. So in this case here, I will put comma in here, and it should allow me to do it because I have it in double quotation marks, so it won't pick it up as a blank like I'm trying to pass on, but I'm not. So if I run this, boom, it has Phoenix, Arizona. All right, so we're almost home. What's the last thing I need to do with the column? Because the column looks funky and the customer doesn't want to do that. What's that? Anyone know I want to type here? As, okay, thank you. We'll say city, state. Perfect. So now, oops, we should be clicking on the gas. Perfect, it looks beautiful. I mean, whatever you want to call it, but it looks good. It's better. And you see we have it sorted by states. Pennsylvania's here, Fort Washington, Philadelphia, etc. Perfect, good job. And at the bottom here, I'm not sure if I didn't mention anything here. This right here keeps a log of the queries that you created, how many rows were in there, so it keeps a log of all that data. Good job. Any other questions? Any questions?
So the book gave they use the single like the
single ticks?
yeah instead of full quotation marks.
Yep. So you could, good question. You could use the ticks, the single tick, or you could use the quotation mark. So either way works, but later on we'll learn about reason you can't use them both together. So I think we'll talk about wildcard searches a little bit today, but we'll get more into it next time. And you'll learn why we use a tick versus a double quotation. So there's a catch-22, but good catch. Did you have? Okay, cool. Someone's reading the book. That's good. All right, and this is all saved, so you guys will look through this. All right. So now we're talking about date formats, just a little bit about it. Because if you look at table we're going to pull from invoices. So I'm just going to pull data from invoices just to get a quick peek of what's out there. So I'll just select everything from invoices. And perfect. So I'm looking at how the date format is here. So by default, it uses month, day, year, month, day. Now, everyone has a preference. A lot of companies you could go to, they'll have month, day, year. Some companies will use everything as like a string, where there's no hyphens or forward slashes. So it just depends on the organization that you have. So it's usually whoever set up the environment typically. So what I'll do is I'll show you once again, and like I said, we'll get more into this later on as using functions. Now we're just using them, but later on we'll talk about how to write a function. And basically a function saves a lot of time. Typically if I wanted to, like for example, I'll go back to Alicia, she mentioned that she gets on at 7 o'clock every night and runs those scripts manually. Me, I would automate them, and it sounds like that's what she's going to do. So that's kind of what a function does. A function is a big block of source code. And so if the function didn't exist, you would have to write a bunch of queries out to get exactly what you want to do, which takes time. So if you have this function, it saves you time, and that's what it's doing here, saving us time with all this stuff. And these are called system functions. Later on, we'll learn how to write our own functions. We'll think about what we want to do with it. All right, so we have an idea what the dates are. So what we'll do here is we'll talk about month, day, year. We'll talk about just different formats that we could do. So let's do this. All right, so once again, I need to do a function. So I'll do this right here. I'll say pick a table first, invoice date. Then I'll choose date format. Boom, it picks it up automatically. And I'm going to do a comma here. Well, I'll do as. So let's do as, and we'll call it month, day, day. You know what? Let's just say new invoice date. Okay. And then we'll do another date format. And we'll also just call it new invoice date second. All right, perfect. All right. So this first one, we just pass in a value. So this one will be a little bit different. So we'll pass in invoice date. But now what we're going to do is we're going to send it something called an expression. Has anyone ever heard of an expression? Yeah, go ahead. What is it? Oh, you just remember from class. Anyone on the remotely ever heard of an expression?
Yeah.
You want to tell us what it is? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm not sure how to describe it.
It does something magic, right? So it's fine. So expression is just like adding a parameter to your source code, but it allows it to do something specific, kind of like a function. Function in this case is going to say, hey, we're going to format it and do the code, but we're going to send an expression that tells us how we want it to kind of look. So for example, I'm trying to think of a really good example. Okay, you're building a basketball court, and obviously it needs either concrete or blacktop. So expression would be kind of like the blacktop or the concrete. You might just lay cement down, and obviously you're just going to flatten it out. But maybe the customer wants swirls. Maybe the customer wants something special. So an expression provides that specific thing that you want. And that's what it's going to do with the date format. It's going to provide exactly the formula, that secret sauce that makes Aunt Betty's spaghetti taste good. So hopefully that's a dumb way of explaining it, a better way of explaining it. So I'll do a tick percentage, and then I'll do M for month. And these are in the book. And then I'll do a D for day, and then I'll do another /, and I'll do a Y for year, and a tick, and just like that. And it picks it up perfectly fine. And now one thing is I need to put, you see how I have invoice date here? So what I'm doing, date format. Date format is accepting two parameters. The field that has the value date in it. Now I can manually, if I wanted to, I can manually do this. I could say, hey, 2018, 09, 00, 09, like that. I can do that too. But what that's going to do is it's going to use that same value over and over and over, and we don't want to do that. So we want to use the one that's in the table so that we can get a different value each time, potentially. All right, so, whoops, did I just erase all that code? All right, there we go. Okay. Oh, beautiful. I just erased all that code. All right, beautiful. All right, so this is one of those dumb moments I just had. All right, so we need invoice date. And then we need again, G slash. Let's do this before we fly. Let's see. Oops. See, actually, SQL Server does this, so I had to remember what environment I was in. All right, so let's do this and see if it even works. First of all. All right. So it doesn't look exactly the way I wanted to do. So I must have typed something in wrong. The reason I say that is because, as you see here, I do have 0818, so it picked up 2018, it picked up 08, but the month it messed up, so I must have typed something in wrong, and it looks like I put that there. All right, so as you see, you can mess it up easily. So it did do it this way, so now you see the difference. You have this one here, but the new one. So now I'm going to copy this code right here. I always tell people to copy and paste. Don't type it out if you don't have to, and just modify it. It makes life easy. You'll learn that when you are doing this type of stuff on a daily basis. So I'm just going to put number 2 at the end this time. This one will be a little different, so I'll just do it like this. And this one will be percentage E minus percentage B minus percentage Y. So this one should give month, day, day, year, but in a different way. I need a comment here so I can add it in here. So now if I run this query, you see what we're doing here is the difference here is we're doing a string value. We're saying April 2018. We're trying to go to the version, instead of doing it as an actual date frame, we're doing it as more of a text. You also may get, let's say that you're building a website, and your website is going to display the date and time. Well, you don't want to have 4/18/18. You want to have April 4th, 2018. You want to have it in text. So this would be some close enough. You would use one of these expressions to put it on there. And what would happen is later on, several chapters from now, we'll learn about something called stored procedures and how you write a stored procedure and how somebody that is writing software code on the front end, say JavaScript, will call your stored procedure. And in this essence, you're passing that data back, and that data might be displayed on the screen. So everything that you do is probably a lot more important than what the developer does, because if the data's not right, it's not going to look right. Any questions?
How did you get the book, like the actual text that you wrote?
The actual text.
Yeah,
This is the having text.apr. So
yeah.
this and this will be something that I'll say look in the book, but the percentage B means that it converts the date to a text base. So there's
That's like a part of the code.
exactly. There's different expressions that you can use. So as you see here, the percentage MDY equals what we think it does, but we couldn't do the M like this. So if we did an M, we'll see what happens. It might blow up on us. All right, so I did it this way instead of, so you can see, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong code. I guess is it the same way? So I think they both do the same.
This one is showing the month, the other one is showing the date.
Oh, okay, you're right. Yeah, okay, you're right. So I would say play around with these and look in the book. There's the different expressions. You could change them around. Any other questions on the formatting? All right, moving on. All right, so we'll show one of these round expressions. So you may have to round something. So let's see if we could grab some of this data here. All right, so round functions. There's a bunch of different functions. You could do summary. So let's say select. I want to select here. We want to do invoice total, for example. So let's say that we wanted to grab not everything. Let's say we want to grab the invoice date. We wanted to grab the invoice total. Let me put from the table, invoices. And now we want to round up. So we'll use the function round. We want to round the invoice total. We'll just call it rounded total. And oops, need a comment here. Select it, run it. You'll see, okay, so you see what it's doing is rounding it to the nearest whole dollar. So you see that 3813 and 33 cents. Now it's rounding it to the 3813. So I'll give you an example. Has anyone ever gone through a drive-through like Taco Bell or Dunkin' Donuts, and they say, hey, do you want to round it to the nearest dollar? So maybe you're giving them 45 cents and they donate it to some charity or something like that. Well, this program could be used to do something like that. You know, they just say, hey, your total's 38.34, and you know, do you want to round it to the whole dollar? So you're giving them 46 cents, and maybe they have a program that does that, calls a function, says it's 46 cents, and that gets donated to charity, whatever. So this is a good feature. It's a good thing. Rounds is used quite often. There's another one called sum. I'd recommend checking that out. That gives you a whole summary of your total. So if someone says, hey, how much money did we make at the casino last weekend? You can use the sum, and it'll sum up the whole value. Just notice that there's no clock in here. We removed the clock. I don't know why I just noticed that now. Anyways, any questions on that? Huh. I don't want to see what time it is. What's that? 7:52. We got time. All right. So now we're going to use other expressions. And these expressions, I don't know if we'll get to everything. Let's see here. So we talked about equals. I'm not going to use that one. We could do, let's do this one. So let's do select all from vendors. So this is a good one here. So I'll select everything from vendors. I'll run a query. And so vendors gives us, zoom out for a second. It gives us all this data. It gives us all these vendors. So there's these other keywords called, and I'll put them here real quick so you guys can see. Expressions I'm thinking about are, oops, we could use equals, we could use, oops, we could use less than, we could use greater than, we could do equals or greater than, less than or equals type. We could do not equals. Actually, it's not. It's exclamation mark equals not equals. So we could do all these different ones. So in this case right here, I want to do all the vendors, and I want to say give me all the vendors less than M. So vendor name is less than M. So what I'm looking for is anything that is an alphabet that is A through before the letter M. So let's do this right here. Oops. So we want to do, you know what, hold on, Control Z.
For the greater than or equal to, shouldn't the greater than sign be in front of the equals?
I'm not sure if I know what you mean. Say that again.
In the comments, you have it as equals and then the greater than sign.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're saying it should be greater. Yeah, it should be greater than or equals. Nice pick. I just use it as an example to say what we're doing, but here's the thing. You're right. Good catch. But if I wrote it and it didn't work, then you would have told me anyway. So I'm happy you're paying attention. So thanks for that. All right. So we'll say where invoice or vendor name is less than M. Okay. And then if I run this query, now it looks like it's less than M. Can anyone tell me how I can figure out if it's less than M. Can anyone tell me something that we learned already that I could get a better eyeball if it's less than M? If it gives me all those letters. Would you think that it would be better if we did like a sorting? Like, say if I did order by vendor name, and let's say, would you guys recommend ascending or descending? Descending, right? Because then we could start with the first the highest letter. So if I run this query now, you see what it starts off. It starts with Lou Gentles, Leslie Company, starts with the L. So that tells me that the query is right because it didn't even go to M. So this is a good way that you could pull up information. So other ways, you could do wildcard searches and say, give me every vendor name that is like, and then we could do a tick percentage M, but that's only going to give us M. So in this case, this would be the quicker way to getting to that value. Any questions?
Like vendor names that only equal then, should you put equal to?
You can put equal to, you mean equal to M?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's do that. Perfect. So we set equals to M. So if I run that, I shouldn't get any values. You know why? Because that right there would be a specific search. So in order to get anything that equals M, we need something called wildcard search. So if we did that, we would have to do something like this, like type in like M, just like that. So you run the expression like that, and you send. And here's the problem with that is it gives you anything with the letter M in it. So now you have to get really technical. So let's do it like this. Then you don't do anything, so I don't remember. Oh, it has to be. I hope so. I could have to look now. I thought that was. I think the other one should give us everything. Yeah, you know what? It's looking for anything that starts with an M or has an M in it. So this one right here, there is one that have M's in it, so it should have gave us a wildcard search. Has M in it, so it's this. All right, so if you do the M and then the percentage, it gives us everything that equals to M. So in that case, that's called a wildcard search. We did like, we did a tick, you see how it works is you put the letter that you're looking for, M in this case, and then the percentage after it. And that means that I want to see anything that starts with an M. If I wanted to see anything that had the M in, then it would be opposite like we had, because you notice the value was different. If we had percentage M, and then it would give us everything that had an M in it. So, any questions on that? I'm actually going to put that there, what that is. So, wildcard search. This is a very popular one to look up. All right. Here. All right, so now we want to select, we're going to do dates again. So we're going to say select everything from invoices. And we want to say for invoice date. Now you'll learn about invoice date things. You'll learn about, there's two ways to get specific dates. You'll learn about between one date and another date. You have a question? I thought you went like that. Oh, okay. So you learn about between, or you learn about less than equal, or, I mean, greater than equal or less than equal. So when someone's to say, give me the date range between April 1st and April 30th. The best way of doing it is going back to that. We talked about group by and distinct. Group by will give you 10 out of 10 will give you the right answer. Where distinct might give you a different value sometimes. It just depends. In this case, if you want to get the exact date range, always, 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 always use greater than equal the value, then less than equal the value, instead of between. Between gets a little confusing, and I'll say why. So if you said give me everything between April 1st and April 30th, what do you think days it gives you? It gives you everything between April 2nd and April 29th. And that's not what you're asking for. So to get the exact results, this is what we would do. We would do this right here. So we'd say, no, I don't know what dates we got here, but we'll just say greater than or equal to 2018. You notice how I have to do the ticks, I have to specify the date. So I'll say 2018-07-01. So this right here should give me everything that's greater than that date if I hit send. Now, it gives me a lot of stuff. So let me do this. Let me order by. Invoice date, and then we'll say descending. So this way, at least gives me an idea of what the date range is. All right, perfect. So we have we said anything that's greater than the 1st of July, and then we went from descending. So that tells me that my last date is the 2nd. So let's see here. I'm trying to think of something that we could do. And here's the thing I'm thinking is when you're doing stuff like this, you want to, standing up the whole time, it's not my vocabulary. So you want to query your data and make sure you know what your count's going to be. So you want to make sure what your volume is going to be. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I want to capture how many records I'm thinking about getting. So I could do real quick and say, give me, to select counts of invoices that is greater than this value, because we want to have an idea what we're looking at. Because you have to make sure that your data is right. You don't want to get wrong data out. Because you, oh, what the hell? I don't have a publish. All right, so I'm not used to the keys here. Nope. All right. Anyways. All right, so I want to do the count. I didn't do it. Perfect. So we want to get a count and see what our records are. So we run this query. It says that we have 35 records. Perfect. So I'll put that beside it. 35 recs. Perfect. Now, when I run this date right here, say everything afterwards. All right, what's going on here? Invoice date. Okay, stupid. Forgot to do a select statement because I copied it and put it up there. So select everything from invoices. All right, so now I run this. I might have to zoom out for a second because I can't see. All right, so when I run it, it shows that there is a bunch of data. It doesn't give me the actual count, and it won't give me the count. Query stats. All right, so if you look here on the query stats, it tells me that there was 35 records. So it did a search through 149 records, and it found 135. I mean, it found 35. I can't look at anything. So it found 35 records, but we know that there's 38 because it's after we know that August is in there too, so that's not 100% right. Because we know that if we do descending, we have this in there. So there should be probably about 37 records in there when we do that. So now if we did this right here, we have where invoice is greater than or equal to 7-1. And then we could use an AND clause here. We come in here and say, and invoice date is less than or equal to 2018 07 31, since it's the last day of the month. And now this right here to give us our data maybe. And it gives us our data. Now what we could do here is we can also do this. We can copy this. We could paste it down here. I'll never give you some excuse. We can paste it down here. And then what we could do here is we could do a count. We could do count like that. And what it's going to do is going to do the same data there. It's going to count the data and use that same query that we have to see what the value is. And there, this one, see, it tells us we have 33. Other one would say we had 35. So it's because the reason for it is the other two, or the 8.1 and 8.2. So I know it was a lot of going back and forth, but what I wanted to show you is when you're querying data, like how Alicia said with the $10 million mistake, but I mean, it sounded like it worked out really well for the company. Instead of making $5 million, it made $10 million. I did a count. I wanted to see what I'm looking to query. So it's always important to do a count and have an idea what number you're trying to get to. And then when you run the query, make sure that you send that report out to the customer. You always want to find a way to verify that the numbers of data that you're providing is accurate. Any questions at all? All right, we're almost done, promise. All right, so there's join tables, and I'm not going to do join tables today. We'll talk about the join tables tomorrow. I'll talk about a couple more expressions because I personally feel that. Well, let me ask you this, and you tell me the truth. What I've provided you tonight, is that a lot of information to absorb, or is it a piece of cake? Piece of cake? Oh, yeah, he's on the fence. How about anyone else? They think it's easy? Yeah, okay. I'll keep going then. How about on the phone? You guys think this is easy, or you think it's challenging? I need one person to speak up.
I'm good. I got it.
All right. I'll keep going then. It's all right. All right, cool. All right, so then we'll talk a little bit about join tables, what they are, and so forth. I'm going to start a new sheet here because the sheet's getting heavy. So let's do this. So, because I don't like to make it too confusing. Let's do this, join tables. All right, so we talked about relational tables. Now we're going to talk about how to join tables together. So, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take, say, invoices and vendors, and we're going to join them together. So we know that our vendor table has vendor data. We know our invoice table has invoice data. So if you look at this, we have a vendor ID. So one of the things that we have to find out is when you're joining two tables, you have to find what the common relationship is. And we talked about this a little bit. So every table has something called a primary key, which is the unique ID that makes up the table, right? And if you want the tables to talk to each other, that other table has to have that same value. And in that case, it's called a foreign key. And the foreign key in this essence means that that other field, so we have vendors, and let's say that vendor is in the invoice ID invoice table, that just means that it's foreign to them. It's like I'm from the United States, and if I went to my home country, when I say my home country, where like my ancestors are from, well, that'd be multiple places, but most of them are from Austria. So if I went to Austria, where most of my heritage is from, then I would be kind of like the foreign key there. I link the two countries together, but I'm the kind of foreign relationship, and that's how this works. So we have to find a common ground. So today we talk about how to link one table. In the future, we'll talk about how to link 8 tables, and that's when it gets kind of crazy, because we will do a database design, and we'll design a map that has multiple tables, and that's part of your final project, which is, and we'll have to talk about that later, but it gets a little fun. I'll say it gets fun. All right, so anyways, I look at the vendors, And I see that the columns they have here, I'm looking at ID tables to be exact. So we have a vendor ID table. All right, perfect. And then I go to the invoice table, and we have, oh, look what we have. We have a vendor ID table. Boom. So that tells me right there that the vendor ID is in the invoice table. So that is our foreign key constraint. That's our relationship. So that's what we're going to try to connect on. So that'll allow us to connect the data together. Okay? Any questions at this point? All right. Cool. So let's do this. Let's put our tables here. So we're going to connect to the vendors table. This is where it gets fun. I'm going to show you guys a shortcut way of doing this. There's a long way and a shortcut, and I hope you take the shortcut because it's better. All right, so we need to know, when we link the tables together, we could put the field names from both tables. So in this case right here, we'll put invoice number. And it's different between languages too. MySQL is a little bit friendlier than SQL Server. You have to specify everything out. And then we'll do vendor name. So what we're doing is we're taking the invoice number from the invoice table, and we're taking the vendor name from the vendor table. Now we're pulling from the vendors. Now we also have to give, when you join two tables, when you join them together, you could let it be the name of the table, but I always tell people to give it an alias name. If you provide an alias name, then it allows you to make the connection better. So when we connect on things, you'll see what I mean. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to give it V for vendors. You could do two ways. You could do as V, but I just like to put V. I like to put the letter next to it. So you could do either or. This is going to be an inner join. And what an inner join means is you're joining on the exact match. So let's say that the vendor ID 456 is only going to show only 456s. But if we wanted to see different ones, then we'd have to do a different join. So remember, inner join is called an exact match. And there's two ways to write the inner join. You can type in inner join, or you can just type in join. It does the same thing. So we inner join on what? So I'm going to write this query out a little bit different. So I try to make it look, I try to write it where I can compile it. So if it doesn't work, I could pick it apart. So we want to pull from what table was that? Invoices? All right, so we'll do invoices, and I'll put an I next to it. And when you do that, make sure it doesn't say, because you see it when they do ignore. I don't want that. Now, I want to talk about what I'm going to join on. So when you do the join, you have to do an on statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to indent here. I'm going to say on. And V, now if I wanted to do the long way, I could type in vendors and then do dot, what is the vendors, vendor ID. I'm sorry, vendors dot vendor ID. You see what I mean? But that works, but it's too long. So I use my alias and just do V dot, and it'll do the same thing. So I'll say vendor ID. Oops. And then we'll say equals, and then we'll do I for invoice dot, I can't even talk, invoice ID, or I mean vendor ID. So you see what we're doing here is we're selecting from our vendors table. Now up here we don't have to specify what table it is; it just knows. Or what field column it is, what table it's coming from. So we put our alias as V, our invoice is I. On, we're saying we want to connect the vendor ID from the vendors table to the vendor ID on the invoices table. We want to get that's what a relational database is. We're connecting it together. And then we're going to do an order by here. Order by, we'll just say vendor ID, and we'll say ascending, just like that. Now, if I run my query, I get nothing. All right, so what did I do wrong? Let me zoom out of here. All right, I see what I did. Anyone tell me what I did? So I didn't tell what database schema is coming from. All right, that's not showing. It's working, but it's not showing the data. Oh, hold on. All right, it's not like vendor ID in order is ambiguous. All right, so let's. All right, so this is what I like about when we troubleshoot. So I'm gonna tag this out because it's saying the order by is ambiguous for some reason. I'm gonna run it and see if it pulls the data up. It did, but why didn't it like my vendor ID? Because here's why it was ambiguous. Because since well, actually, what do you guys think why it was ambiguous? Why do you think it didn't work? Because it didn't know what vendor ID to pull from. Both columns had vendor ID. So when I hashtagged it out, you seen that the code worked. It worked perfectly fine. But up here, I was able to get away with stuff because if I did vendor name, it would work fine. Perfect, no problem. But since I did vendor ID, it says it's ambiguous because it doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's saying it's because in this case, I would have to probably specify it and say what table it's coming from. So I'll say give it to me from the vendor table, then it'll work. So that's the only way that you could order by vendor ID. You have to specify the tables. So if you have, when you do a join, you're going to have two fields that are the same, sometimes even more. And so you have to make sure that you specify in that case. If not, then you'll have to specify. Any questions remotely? All right. Let's see if we can copy some of this data. All right, so we want to do let's just copy some of this code. I'll copy this. Let me show you something else real quick. So I could do this right here as well. I could do join. And by doing join, it'll do the same thing. It does the exact same thing. So the book tells you to do inner join. That's fine, but just learn the trade. You can do join or inner join. It means the same exact thing. Eventually, they're gonna get rid of it and just have it, whatever. All right, so let's do this right here. We're coming up on time. I think we have to be out of here by 8:30, but whatever. Wrong one. All right. All right. The next one is left join. So this captures part of the table. It captures the left side of the table versus the right side of the table. So vendor name, invoice number. So let's do this. Let's copy this code. Come down here and call it left join. Let's paste it here so we don't have to type it in again. So now all we're going to do here is call it a left join. And I think we should add another value. So we're adding name, invoice number. Well, let's keep it as is. All right, so we're doing a left join. Everything else is the same. We're still joining on the same thing. Now, you'll see here, when you do a left join, we didn't talk about these guys yet. Null means it's blank. It means there's no data that exists in that field. So there's no values for it. Doesn't mean it's an error message. It just means that there's no data that applies to it. So when you do a left join, it pulls all the data up, pulls everything, because you're joining. What it's showing you is if you're joining on the ID and you have the ID 5, right? So the vendor has an ID, the vendor ID 5, and the invoice ID has a 5. So they have, it's an exact match. So when we do the inner join, it's going to give us everything. But if we do the left join, what it's going to do is going to show us everything. It's going to show us the matches, and it's going to show us the ones that don't match. So the ones that have the null value means that those two tables don't have a relationship. They don't have the same ID. So that just means that maybe your boss says, hey, give me everything, I want to see it, and you're just like, oh, let's just do a left join. It's going to give me all the data, and you're going to see which ones doesn't have a relationship, because there might be a reason why they don't have a relationship, and maybe the code's not working and the value has to be updated. Okay, does that make sense? Anyone remotely, does that make sense? Any questions? All right. You guys are the quietest database group I've ever had. And it might be because it's online, because my other online class, other in-person / online class is the same way. Anyways, I could do a right join as well. So let's see what that does. Join. Paste it. Just put right join. And we'll run the query. And we'll see. We have data. Do you notice the difference here? It pulls all the data. It's almost like an inner match, but it pulls up the data like duplicate times. But it pulls all the information up. Where left join is only going to give you everything in the table from the left side of it, which provides the values. But in the right join, it's everything to the right of the join, but you won't get the same values as the left. So remember, left will give you everything, whether they match or not. Right won't. It just provides the other side of the table. What time is it? 8:15. Trying to think if I could do another one for you. All right. Yeah, let's do one. Let's do another one here. All right, so this one right here is going to be a left outer join. Now you're getting, so you have your inner join, you get your right join, your left join, you have your left outer join, you have your right outer join. So there's 5 different joins that you join on. And it just depends on the data that you're looking for. Back to Alicia's question. This time we're going to use a different schema. This will be the schema that you guys will download this week. It's called the EX schema, and you'll put that in your environment if you have your environment up and running. Maybe. There we go. So now we have different ones here. So I'm going to have to skim me out here real quick. So if I see if I'm done. All right. So this one we're going to join on multiple tables now. So we're going to put use EX because we want to use that schema. We're going to do select. Actually, let's put the table that we're going to select from. Let's say departments. I'll put D for departments. And then we'll put our department name. Maybe. Then we'll have a department name. Then we have a last name. And we have project name, I think. Project number, sorry. From the department. Let's see if it even pulls it up. It's acting funny. Acting real funny. All right. Let's see. All right. Unknown column last name. All right. Okay, so this is a problem. So it tells me it doesn't know the column, so I'm going to go to departments. Maybe I'm spelling something wrong. No, we got departments right. Let me look at the column. Okay, so I'm an idiot. I'm looking up something that doesn't exist, but here's the problem. I know it exists in the other tables that I don't pull from, so that means I can't pull from it yet. All right, so I'm not a complete idiot yet, so we're almost there. All right, so we're going to do a left join, and now we're going to join on employees. I'll put employees, and now we have to specify how we're joining. So we're going to say on D dot, so we have probably use department ID as department number, which means that department number is in the employees table. So it's E dot department number. Now we've joined those tables. Now we're going to do another join. And this, when you do left outer join, you're joining from multiple tables, not just an individual table. So remember, left join, right join, one table you're doing. If you're doing an outer join, you're joining from multiple tables. So now we want to join the projects table in. We'll do P, and we'll do on. What's the project one? It's the time. It's employee ID. So now you want to grab. Another thing that you want to do is when you go down and do the left outer join. So real quick, so we queried from, when we did on departments equals e.employees, which is not pulling it up for some reason. Then when you join the next table, you want to join on the next table. So it's like holding hands. You hold, Ralph is holding Bob's hand and Bob is holding Heidi's hand. So in order to join, Bob is connected to Heidi and Bob is connected to Bob. So that's how the outer join works. But I have a problem here because employees does not show up. All right, employees, column, e-department number. Let's do this because, you know what, I'm an idiot. I had to equals. I was hoping you guys catch on to this stuff and tell me that I'm doing it wrong. So keep your eye out. If you're not saying anything, I mean, you're either sleeping. You might be doing that at home, I don't know. Employee ID equals projects. So we'll do employee ID. Okay, and then we have, all right, so we don't actually need to do the order by yet. Yeah, so let's just query this and see if it works. That's an important thing. Does it even give us data? It does give us data. So it does pull information. As you see here, since we did the left outer join, we're getting everything. If we did an inner join, we would not even get these values right here. We'd only get the other values from here on up. Okay? So now we could probably do an order by. And we could order by department, name, and last name. And there we go. We got everything ordered by. Perfect. All right. Any questions on that? And that's how you would do the right join. You would do this right outer join. You would do the same exact thing. I have one more thing left. We have 9 minutes left. Max, it doesn't look like we're getting to your thing, so please send me a screenshot through Slack. You could put it on the, you can send it to me directly, or you could just put it on the channel, our channel for database, and then everyone could see it.
It was working. It was just a different color than yours.
Oh, okay. So, all right. Yeah, it's actually, since I'm using the thing, you could specify what color you want to use. Last thing that we're going to do is a union query. And a union query is when you do multiple queries on top of each other. What that means is you pull a set of queries, and it's queries that you don't have joined together. You want to consolidate the data on top of each other. So this will be the last query that we do. So I'm going to type in select, and then I'm going to give it a hard value and say active. So I'm specifying active versus non-active. Well, in this case, active versus paid. So we'll say as source. And then, let's see here. All right, then we're going to have invoice number, and we'll have invoice date, invoice total. Really need to get, I need to move this desk up. It's too small for me. All right, so now from table, and we'll put active invoices. Okay. And then we're going to say where the invoice date is greater than or equal to, let's say what we want here, 2018, 0601. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to see if the data even works. You know, we want to make sure it's going to work. So the first thing we want to do is, you want to test your data. Let's see if it even works. All right, so that's a positive sign it works. So now let's copy this code, paste it. Now here's the trick about when you do your union. You have to make sure that the columns are the same. So for example, if you're doing invoice number and invoice number, you have to have invoice number. If you have invoice ID where invoice number's at, guess what? They're going to explode and they're not going to like each other. So on this one right here, we're going to do less than or equal to, say, 630. Yeah. And then the big thing is we have to type in union. So now we type in union. So I probably want to do this. And there you go. Now you have all the data union together. I'm actually going to do an order by. And we'll do it by source. Sending from active to non-active. There we go. Have it all the way down the line. You can export this stuff too. So you can export it to, when you hit export, it'll allow you to save it as a CSV file, HTML. HTML I won't do, but you can save it as a CSV file, whatever. That'll be in the future. All right. I think we got to everything pretty much. The only thing we didn't do was the right outer join, but it's the same as the left outer join. We didn't talk about OR statements, but we'll get to those in other weeks. But pretty much got to everything that you need to for the assignment this week. Ask you guys at home, any questions at home on the work?
Can you pull up your code one real quick? The last one.
Absolutely. Maybe. Yep. Which part?
I just needed to look at it.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Did you save this and upload it to like Slack?
Yeah. So, you mean the video?
Or no, like the SQL?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll upload it to Slack. Might want to save. Let's see. Save as free exercise. All right. Yep, I'll save it. I'll throw it to Slack. Any other questions? All right. I'll see how this works because I've never did it before, so hopefully got everything. I'll stop sharing. It's recording still. Stop recording.